I truly have led a Forrest Gumpian life. I sailed with President John F. Kennedy when I was 18 years old, and I met John Lennon and introduced John Lennon at a major anti-war rally in New York in 1971, and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Robin Williams, and Judy Collins, these great names of music were all part of my political journey. And then one day, a few years ago, I was playing hockey out in Ketchum, Idaho, and I was skating hard down the ice, and this guy fell in front of me. And I knew I was either going to crash into him, or we both kill each other, or I'd jump over him and escape. So I literally leapt over him, feet head first and everything. But as I was flying over him, he decided it was time to get up. So he got up, and the back of my legs went up. My face went plant right into the ice. There was no time to get hands in front. You could hear the crack across the entire ice. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee when this happened. I had not yet been secretary. And so I turn around to see who is this freak who just interrupted my day and my life. And he takes off his helmet, and it's none other than Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks. So help me God. And so I said, well, what do I say to this guy? Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know who's going to hit you in the face or whatever the hell it is. I mean, I grew up with the war in my head. The Germans took over our house in Brittany as a headquarters during the war. And when they learned that our family knew the Churchill family, et cetera, they promptly bombed it and burned it as they left. When General Patton was moving the Third Army down the Cotentin Peninsula and coming to liberate Brittany. And so in 1947, this is my first memory as a child, was walking, holding my mother's hand through the rubble and hearing the broken glass crunching beneath my feet. And my mother was crying, and obviously as a 4-year-old I was upset. I didn't know why she was crying. So I saw a chimney at one end of the house going up into the sky. I saw a stairwell in the other end going up into the sky, and that's all that was left of the house. Vivid, vivid memory. That memory was seared in me, and I played in German bunkers as a kid. As an American kid, I was playing in a German bunker. And I went to the beaches of Normandy, maybe 2 years after that. I was a little older, but I remember seeing the detritus of that invasion on the beaches still. And I often thought about that, because as I progressed in my anti-war and political career after I came back from Vietnam, I realized that my memories of the war in Vietnam were increasingly getting further away than that remarkable memory I had of being at the beach of Normandy only 3 or 4 years after the war had ended. And I urge any of you here who really want to go back and read about this period, the best book I ever read about Vietnam was Neil Sheehan, Bright Shining Lie. It's brilliant, brilliantly researched and brilliantly put together. And what I learned, I didn't read it because he didn't publish it until, 10, 15 years after I came back. But I read it then after I had demonstrated against the war and led the veterans in the March on Washington when we stood up to Richard Nixon's threat to arrest all of us. And I got angrier. I mean, I didn't realize the lying, the obfuscation, the exaggeration began in the late 1950s, in the early 1960s. So I didn't go till 1968. And I didn't demonstrate against the war until 1971. I'm the guy who blew the whistle on Oliver North and the Iran-Contra. I did it by holding hearings and steadily going after that information because I saw in it exactly what I'd learned in Vietnam. One of the things I'm proudest of, ladies and gentlemen, is, and it's in the book, not well known. My record was grossly distorted and lied about when I ran for president. And for years, people have never really been aware of what the Vietnam Veterans Against the War did. But we were the first people to start what were then called rap groups. If you've ever heard of rap group. So we put together rap groups, not rap singing, but rap talking. And we worked with Dr. Robert Lifton eminent psychiatrist at Yale University. And we put together these groups so vets could get together and talk to each other and realize they weren't alone, that everybody was trying to work this out. We lost more American veterans to the period post coming home than are on the wall in Washington, D.C. We lost them to suicide, to addiction, to drugs, to alcohol. I mean, it's a terrible story. I approached the Iraq vote very carefully. I went to the UN. I met with all of the UN and permanent ambassadors. I asked them if we were to delay and put together a coalition, if Saddam Hussein does not allow us to inspect and it comes down to having to force him to, will you be there? Will you be part of this? And they agreed that if enough time went by and we actually made legitimate efforts, yes, they would. And I went to Colin Powell. I spent time with Colin, who I greatly respect. I mean, he's a great friend. And he was kept in the dark. He really didn't have all the information. And I went over to the Pentagon, and I was briefed with a group of people personally, and I was shown the buildings where the weapons were. And we were not told who the sources of that were. We asked, but we were not told. So when President Bush gave a speech in Cincinnati saying, I'm going to exhaust all the remedies of diplomacy, we will not rush to war, and I will not go to war without a coalition, major, real coalition of our friends and allies, a group of us, Senator Bob Kerry, Hillary Clinton, myself, others, and Bob Kerry knew war, Medal of Honor winner, lost a leg, ballooned the knee. We voted to give the president the tool with which he could leverage better behavior out of Saddam Hussein, with an understanding that the promises of the speech had to be kept. Well, they weren't. We still have remarkable soldiers and remarkable patriots, but we don't do enough thinking throughout the body politic of our nation, certainly, about service and about sacrifice and about what we're fighting for. And here we are with Italy and mumbo jumbo, with Hungary and Orban, with Germany experiencing rattlings of old ghosts, economic fear and of anti-Semitism and of personal vilification of people because of race or religion or creed or whatever. It's very dangerous, and I think everybody senses that. And there's a dearth of leadership that's willing to define why it's important to be fighting for those things. That's one of the reasons why I thought EU meant something so vital. We didn't form the EU as a response to a need for an economic relationship. The EU was put together in order to stop people in Europe from killing each other. And we need to remember that as we go forward. With the Gingrich Revolution came some critical promises: smaller government, lower taxes, less regulation, get rid of Roe v. Wade, which is our Supreme Court decision on abortion, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And what happened is nothing happened. None of those things were delivered. So then you transition from Gingrich. Gingrich was thrown out. He turned out to have his own ethical problems. And with him being thrown out, then came the Tea Party. And after the Tea Party, which didn't deliver on any of those things, came the Freedom Caucus. And after the Freedom Caucus, which didn't deliver on any of those things, came a hostile takeover of the Republican Party by Donald Trump. It's effectively where we are.
Do the results of the midterm elections
give
any grounds for hope?
I got it.
Trump will not serve 2 terms as president.
Well, there's always hope, but I mean, I think the midterms, let me put the midterms in a context. I think the midterms are a very dramatic moment. I was worried about them the night of. I was a little worried the next morning. Didn't quite know where it was going. But now the verdict is in. This is the most significant number of new congressmen and women going to Washington since the Watergate class of 1974, when it was elected 2 months after Richard Nixon had resigned. That's huge. We face several life-threatening challenges that if we don't respond very quickly, we are inviting catastrophe on this planet. I mean, literally. I followed the issue of climate change for 30 years. Al Gore, Tim Wirth, Frank Lautenberg, Jack Hines, myself, others held the first hearings on climate change in 1988 when Jim Hansen first said to us, this is happening now. Here we are in 2018. And we have a climate-denying president of the United States who pulls us out of the work we did in Paris at a time where every day really matters. Last year, we had 3 storms in the United States that cost us $265 billion, folks. Harvey, Irma, Maria. Maria destroyed Puerto Rico. Harvey dropped, it was supposedly a once in 50,000 year storm. It dropped as much water in 5 days on the Houston, Texas area as flows over Niagara Falls in an entire year. We agreed in Paris to put $100 billion into the Green Climate Fund. There's probably about $6 billion in there today. And nation states are making bad decisions because they don't have the money that was technically supposed to be there to help them make the investments in alternative, renewable, sustainable energy that are there for the waiting, but are expensive for them. They can't afford it, so they go with coal. China's still on target to build a whole set of coal-fired power plants to create 250,000 megawatts of power. And India, similarly. We shouldn't be building one single coal-fired power plant anywhere on the planet if we're going to meet the standard of what has to be done. No government in the world, I think, can move fast enough in today's world to do what we need to do to deal with climate change. But you all, the voters, have got to make damn sure that everybody who's going into office anywhere understands this threat. I got news for you. We've tried everything there is on the planet. We've tried everything. You got a new ism, tell me what it's called. But, you know, we've had benevolent dictators, malevolent dictators, despots, we've had monarchies of one kind or another, parliamentary, we've had constitutional, we've had non-constitutional, we've had socialism, communism, fascism, everything. And as Winston Churchill correctly said, democracy is the worst form of government in the world, except for everything else.